Welcome to the Daily Influence, where our mission is to deliver a daily dose of positive influence that can uplift you personally or be shared within your sphere of influence. While not every episode may directly apply to your unique circumstances, we strive to provide insights and inspiration relevant to most people's daily, weekly, and monthly lives. Whether you are tuning in during the morning, noon, or night, the Daily Influence is here for you. Listen, share, and embrace the power of influence in your life. Hey everybody, Brian Smith here with the I and Team series and the Daily Influence. And we are going down the path of individualism. And individualism for us, as we pointed out yesterday, has dual meaning, which creates an oxymoron in our environment. It is about best self one and best self many as we act as one. And an individual to us means both. So today is about accountability and the value of accountability and how accountability is so important to us in being best self, regardless of what that best self means, regardless of how we define it, what we do with it. To be best self, it's going to require accountability. And we taught accountability to our children as an early age. And that includes how they speak and how they act. They're accountable for both in their areas of influence. And how we hold people accountable is not the same as, or it doesn't clearly mean that it's a negative consequence. Being held accountable doesn't have to be a negative. Being held accountable doesn't have to have with it some kind of corrective action. Being accountable is as simple as understanding and acknowledging that something happened that was contradicted what was expected. And this misconception about what accountability means makes accountability a struggle for many individuals. And I mean individuals, both singular and plural. Companies have problems with accountability because they think it needs to be negative. People have a problem with accountability because they don't understand what the word means or how to do it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. There's two types of accountability in our mind. There's self-accountability, and then there's outsourced accountability. And self-accountability is exactly what it seems. It is holding oneself accountable when we identify that we've done something that is contrary to what was expected. We hold ourselves accountable for. We admit it. We try to correct it in whatever way we can. It's not about being in trouble. It's just about holding ourselves up to that high standard of doing what we say, being consistent with what that means, and understanding that we have influence through our words and actions, and holding ourselves to those words and actions consistently. When we struggle with accountability, when we find ourselves challenged with an ability to be accountable or to hold others accountable, there's the other type of accountability, which we like to call outsourced accountability. And outsourced accountability is when we bring in others to help look over us and to hold us true to what our words and our actions are. Hold us to that, to be consistent with them, to be consistent with words and actions. And we can have others help us to do that when we struggle with the willpower, the maturity, or the understanding to be accountable to ourselves. Accepting personal accountability actually isn't about maturity. It isn't about education. It isn't about any single trait. Each of us has a different path to being accountable. And not all people can be self-accountable. Not all people can hold themselves accountable. Not all people do well with accountability. They don't react well to it. They don't deal with accountability well. There's people that will never be accountable, and there are people that are accountable for everything, which is some of the things that we're going to talk to. My path to accountability didn't come until probably as I got to my middle to high school years, and were challenged by situations that began to hold me accountable and have consequences. And consequences are not accountability. Consequences are the results of the bad actions that we should be held accountable. Consequences come when we do something contrary to what was expected. And then there needs to be accountability to help us learn and to help us grow. I moved around a lot. I've talked a lot about how fractionalized and how fragmented my childhood was. And one of the things that I missed in that childhood, even though I went to private schools, a private Lutheran school, and there was discipline from that environment, but there wasn't accountability. And there's a big difference between discipline and accountability. But I didn't have accountability in my life. And when I moved to Southern California, I lashed out in my behavior, in the challenges, and in the continued bullying that happened to me. And I was taken aside by the people there to be held accountable. Well, I didn't react well to that. Well, I didn't know what it meant. It wasn't really explained to me in that way. And it felt like it was consequences. It felt like it was correction because I didn't understand it. It wasn't really conveyed to me. I wasn't really brought up with a foundation of accountability. I was brought up with, well, discipline, which is something completely different. I ended up going back to Illinois and then back to California, and through it all, there were learning opportunities about accountability. And each iteration of those moves, each time that I tried to run away from the challenges that I was facing in these new experiences where I was learning about accountability, as I ran from it and as my parents allowed me to run from it, as my step parents pushed back from allowing me to run for it, because they were the two people who were trying to hold me accountable. They were the two people who were putting into place behavioral consequences that supported learning accountability. There was this conflict, but we just kept going back and forth. And it really wasn't until I really got myself in trouble. These layers of misunderstanding, these layers of conflict didn't truly show me what it meant. And it wasn't until I went to jail, it wasn't until it was pointed out the differences between accountability and discipline and consequences. It wasn't until that lesson was outlined and put into my life contextually through being thrown in jail, being faced with the decision of jail or the military, and then consequently going into the military and seeing what that environment was and learning about the accountability of self and the accountability of understanding about being on a team and all that that entailed. Those layers of understanding, those layers of consequences, those layers of challenges in areas of influence finally clicked with me. If you're not held accountable for your actions, you develop bad actions. If you're not held accountable for how you speak or how you treat people, you will develop bad behaviors. And it layers itself. And as you learn the lesson of accountability and peel that away, if you really pay attention to what's happening to you, you can change that behavior. You can become an accountable person. You can learn to be self-accountable. You can learn to help others be accountable in a positive way. And really, that's what the military did, is it taught me about positive accountability. Yes, some of the behavior correcting traits seemed negative at the time, but they had a long-term positive influence on me. And being accountable didn't have to be negative. I learned that if we expect to be held accountable, then we can accept what the consequences are. When we understand what accountability means, then we slow down and understand consequences and risks. And if we choose to do something in spite of those risks and consequences, and we activate what those consequences are because of our choice, we can face those consequences in a positive way, which means we are being accountable for them. We are accepting the consequences. Might not necessarily be a positive, might not necessarily be a negative, but it means that we are starting to understand what accountability means and how accountability can be a powerful tool in our areas of influence. And when I know that I can't be accountable, I ask others to help me. I have asked team members to correct me if I'm inconsistent. I've asked team members to support me in projects that I'm working on. I've asked team members to be there to help me to be consistent, to have positive influence. Areas where I know that I struggle with certain tasks or certain follow-throughs or certain ability to slow down, I solicit others to help me be accountable in those areas of influence. Key takeaways for accountability are, if we escape accountability, we can create destructive habits. I did that as a child, and many people can really align with what that means. If we enforce accountability for ourselves and others in a positive way, then positive things will happen. That doesn't mean that we accept poor behavior. It doesn't mean that we agree with poor behavior or we agree with anything. It just means that we understand that enforcing accountability will create positive results. And accountability is not necessarily negative. In fact, accountability can always be positive influence as it helps us to understand us, individuals and larger individuals, how it helps us to create consistent positive action, consistent human development, consistent cultures that we want to have areas of influence in. I hope we have helped at least lay a foundation of accountability. We're going to layer again on top of it tomorrow as we move into consistency and how accountability and consistency together can be one of the most powerful leadership and self-development tools we can use to make positive influence something for us in our life. Have a good day.